I never want it to come off as me being ungrateful for the opportunities I have. I can also be having the greatest time and simultaneously wishing people would stop sending me death threats.
The cartoon was made 85 years ago, and therefore it's extremely dated. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird. And I took a pause and realized what I was auditioning for, and then it became like, I will elbow everyone out of the way.
What would you say to those who are just kind of overly critiquing the film at this point? You've worked so hard on it. All right, congrats, Rachel.
Picture the classic Disney magic: grand musical numbers, breathtaking visuals, and a beloved fairy tale story. Now imagine the opposite. A movie that, despite being backed by one of the most powerful studios in the world, faces a staggeringly low turnout in theaters and an overwhelming amount of negative buzz online. That is exactly what happened with Disney's live-action Snow White. The film stumbled right out of the gate, opening to a mere 86 million globally, an alarmingly low figure for a project with a reported production budget of $270 million. To put that in perspective, even some modestly budgeted films have surpassed this total in their first weekend. For a studio as large and storied as Disney, it's not just about how much money was spent, it's about brand reputation. A swift drop at the box office suggests a colossal disconnect between the studio's expectations and the audience's reception. Disney has produced numerous live-action remakes in the past decade, but none have started so poorly. Some have questioned whether viewers are simply exhausted by the constant parade of reimaginings of classic Disney titles. Others see a deeper issue: controversy-laden marketing, an increasingly skeptical fan base, and a leading star whose public comments alienated potential viewers. Whatever the exact cause, it's undeniable that Snow White is now on track to become one of Disney's biggest financial disasters, leaving executives and fans alike wondering how and why the House of Mouse misread its audience so drastically. The surprising twist in Snow White's downfall isn't just about numbers. It's about who's carrying the blame. According to industry reports and insiders, Disney is pointing fingers squarely at lead actress Rachel Zegler. Normally, you'd expect a studio to rally behind its star when a film underperforms, if only to protect a multi-million-dollar investment. Yet in this case, leaks and off-the-record comments suggest a different story. Disney executives reportedly feel that Zegler's social media posts and public statements did more harm than any lukewarm early reviews or lackluster trailers could have. This is an unusual stance for Disney, a company traditionally known for keeping internal conflicts tightly under wraps. Yet the studio is under intense pressure to explain why a once promising project took such a spectacular nosedive. In their view, Zegler's online presence and controversial opinions became a lightning rod for negativity, transforming Snow White into a PR nightmare well before it ever reached theaters. From the moment Disney announced that Rachel Zegler, a Latina actress, would take on the role of Snow White, controversy began to swirl. Traditionally, the princess has been depicted as fair-skinned with raven hair and ruby lips, one of Disney's most iconic characters. For decades, her classic appearance was as recognizable as Cinderella's glass slipper or Sleeping Beauty's spindle. So, when the studio opted for a more diverse representation, reactions were immediate and divided. On one hand, supporters praised Disney for stepping away from the norm and embracing a more inclusive approach to beloved stories. They pointed out that fairy tales can be retold for modern audiences, and that increased diversity on screen can help children from all backgrounds see themselves in popular media. Yet for many longtime fans, the decision felt like an abrupt departure from the original 1937 animated classic. Comment sections and online forums lit up with debates over whether the move was a progressive step forward or a needless change that risked overshadowing the story itself. What began as a well-intentioned move to celebrate inclusivity soon turned sour. Even before the film's official marketing push, critics accused Disney of virtue signaling, woke marketing, aimed more at scoring social media points than at faithfully adapting the beloved tale. This early backlash set the tone for what would become a storm of negative headlines, foreshadowing the marketing and PR challenges that lay ahead. Rachel Zegler's social media activity introduced an unexpected and explosive element to the film's already polarizing narrative. While celebrities voicing political opinions is nothing new, Zegler's approach went beyond a single tweet or passing remark. In the midst of promoting Snow White, she appended Free Palestine to celebratory posts about the film's trailer views, promptly drawing attention away from the movie and toward a contentious geopolitical issue. This move also appeared to highlight a rift between her and Gal Gadot, a co-star of Israeli heritage who soon found herself facing online hostility. Matters escalated further when Zegler publicly denounced former President Donald Trump and urged his supporters not to watch Snow White. By doing so, she essentially alienated a substantial segment of the potential audience, igniting debates over whether a studio-backed star should ever tell certain viewers to stay home. The timing also felt off to many fans who had expected light-hearted promotional content for a fairy tale film rather than strong political statements. All of this unfolded against the backdrop of Disney's already fragile marketing strategy. With the film's fate in a precarious place, the studio likely hoped to keep public attention on the movie's visuals, music, and updated storyline. However, Zegler's comments ended up dominating headlines, overshadowing nearly every other aspect of the production in the public eye. By the time Snow White finally arrived in theaters, the negative sentiment had reached critical mass. Conversations about Rachel Zegler's remarks and Disney's seemingly woke approach overshadowed the movie itself, transforming its release into a cultural flashpoint rather than a celebration of a classic fairy tale. Chatter on social media became a snowball, picking up momentum with each new piece of critical press or outraged commentary. Review bombing on major sites contributed to the spiral, with some users openly admitting they had no intention of ever watching the film but felt compelled to register a protest. Meanwhile, original Disney fans, who had once hoped for a thoughtful update to Snow White, began to question whether the film was more about delivering a heavy-handed message than recapturing the charm of the 1937 classic. The controversy proved irresistible for news outlets, YouTubers, and bloggers who seized on every new soundbite. What might have been a routine release for a Disney property quickly morphed into a referendum on modern Hollywood. In the end, the backlash wasn't limited to a niche group of vocal detractors. It became a mainstream conversation that made even casual moviegoers wary of purchasing a ticket. Amid the storm of controversy, Gal Gadot found herself in an uncomfortable spotlight. Cast as the evil queen, she brought an established fan base and the significant star power to the production. However, her Israeli heritage became a flashpoint once Rachel Zegler's Free Palestine posts gained traction. Though Zegler's statements were not explicitly aimed at Gadot, the online hostility spilled over, with some individuals targeting Gadot simply because she was Israeli. Alarming reports of death threats emerged, prompting Disney to enhance Gadot's security measures. Suddenly, instead of focusing on the dynamic between Snow White and the evil queen, many conversations pivoted to real-world geopolitical tensions. It was a surreal situation for a fairy tale adaptation, blurring the lines between Hollywood fantasy and very real, very serious conflicts. Before this uproar, Gadot had maintained a measured online presence, occasionally referencing her support for her home country without tying it directly to Snow White. In another context, this discretion then might have gone unnoticed, but in a film riddled with PR turmoil, Gadot's more cautious stance stood in stark contrast to her co-star. Ultimately, her situation highlighted how easily a large-scale production can lose control of its narrative when multiple controversies converge. Behind the scenes, Disney tried to rein in the crisis before it fully overwhelmed the film's marketing push. Executives reportedly encouraged Rachel Zegler to dial back her most polarizing online commentary, going as far as funding a specialized social media guru to review her posts. In theory, this measure was designed to stem the tide of negative press, ensuring that the conversation could return to the movie's fairy tale roots. However, by that stage, the damage to Snow White's reputation had largely been done. Weeks of bad headlines had formed a near impenetrable narrative around the film, painting it as a cautionary example of politics invading family entertainment. Disney's efforts to muzzle or soften Zegler came across to many observers as too little, too late, another sign that the studio was scrambling rather than steering the ship. In an era where a single tweet can overshadow a multi-million-dollar promotional campaign, last-minute interventions have limited efficacy. By the time Disney took action, public perception was almost set in stone, illustrating just how critical early messaging and online discourse can be. Beyond the cast controversies, Snow White also suffered from an arduous production process marked by reshoots and ballooning costs. According to reports, multiple rounds of reshoots drove the film's budget above $270 million, an enormous figure for a fairy tale adaptation. Each revision introduced new logistical hurdles and creative pivots, heightening the stakes for an already embattled project. This mounting budget also put immense pressure on Disney's marketing team. With so much capital at risk, every strategy, from release timing to promotional tie-ins, needed to be flawless. However, the growing skepticism around the film made these marketing efforts feel like an uphill battle. For many, the final product appeared to deviate so sharply from the 1937 original that nostalgia, a key selling point for remakes, was overshadowed by controversy. Ultimately, these production headaches merged with ongoing PR disasters, putting the once golden Disney brand in a precarious light. Instead of generating buzz for a whimsical reimagining, Snow White became an emblem of how quickly a big-budget project can spiral when controversy outstrips storytelling. For many industry watchers, the downfall of Snow White is emblematic of a much larger rift in Hollywood. Studios like Disney are pushing to modernize their most iconic stories, weaving inclusivity and contemporary themes into decades-old properties. Meanwhile, a significant segment of the audience yearns for faithful adaptations that preserve the spirit and aesthetics of beloved classics. The tension becomes even more fraught when a high-profile star uses their public platform to issue politically charged statements, effectively turning a once universal story into a divisive flashpoint. Online communities, already polarized, are quick to brand such moves as agenda-pushing, while others defend them as essential progress. What's clear is that the stakes are higher than ever for studios navigating this challenging landscape. An entire project can be overshadowed if the public perceives that cultural or political messaging has taken precedence over storytelling. At its core, the Snow White saga shines a spotlight on the difficulty of balancing creative vision, social awareness, and commercial viability. In trying to appeal to everyone, traditional fans, progressive audiences, and investors, studios risk alienating them all, exposing the fragility of modern blockbuster filmmaking. While Rachel Zegler's actions certainly fueled the controversy, Disney itself bears a considerable share of responsibility. By reimagining the original storyline to reflect modern values, and by casting Zegler partly to showcase inclusivity, the studio may have underestimated how fans would react to such sweeping changes. The delayed, uncoordinated attempt to manage Zegler's outspokenness only exacerbated the negative perception that Disney was caught off guard. The Snow White debacle ultimately serves as a cautionary tale for both Hollywood studios and rising stars, In today's digital age, audience sentiment can shift in an instant, and social media controversies can overshadow even the most lavish marketing campaigns. For Disney, a company that has long prided itself on uniting families and sparking wonder, the lesson is stark. Balancing fan expectations with modern sensibilities is a high-stakes endeavor. When that balance is lost, even a storied brand can stumble, and a cherished fairy tale can transform into a cautionary box office story.